Hello, everyone, and welcome to Working In with Heights, potentially the only series dedicated to exercising your brain as well as your body. So, we believe a healthy brain is the key to a healthy, happy life. So, we created this idea of a cranium gymnasium to help people take the time to nourish their brains as well as their bodies. Heights is all about brain health and mental wellness. We make smart, sustainable supplements that combine the essential oils and nutrients your body and your brain need, and we deliver them to your doorstep every month. And then we create clever content in collaboration with leading experts like tonight to help you optimize your brain health and performance too, so you can reach your heights, whatever they might be. That's all from me. Time to introduce today's mental fitness instructor, Rhiannon Lambert. So firstly, welcome, Rhi.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm a registered nutritionist. I have a first class degree in nutrition and health, a master's degree in obesity risks and prevention, and I'm a master practitioner working with eating disorders and different relationships with food, so disordered eating behaviors. It tends to flow, the kind of work I do as a registered nutritionist, as I am bound by a code of conduct and ethics. So I am governing body bound, meaning everything I say will be grounded in science. And I'm extremely passionate about making science, especially nutrition, evidence-based nutrition, accessible to many people, which is where my platforms, Rhitrition on social media, came from, my books, Renourish. And I kind of have a very different journey into nutrition. I used to be a singer, I'm now a nutritionist. And my philosophy is pretty much building healthy relationships with food, because everybody has a story and journey, which we'll discuss today. And it's something on my podcast, Food for Thought, which I host. We discuss a lot of different science topics. I'm very lucky I get to interview, like yourself, you get to interview lots of really cool, amazing, intelligent guests, and you kind of learn so much every time. So a little bit about me, I guess I'm passionate about those things, and I have a multitude of books and platforms and social media stuff going on alongside my clinic, where I run a team of health professionals, and we work on many different aspects: sports nutrition, gut health, intuitive eating, eating disorders, pre and postnatal, weight management, you name it, we've got someone in the clinic that can help.
What do you think are some of the most common misconceptions people have about food and how to relate to them psychologically?
I think the biggest misconceptions would be carbohydrates, psychologically. Yeah, I could see you smile there when I said that, because I think everybody has a thing, or it's ingrained in them that having a pizza is really bad. It's, it's a treat night, therefore a treat must be bad for you because it's a treat, right? So the mindset and the rule we've got is anything that we enjoy is bad for us, which is not true at all. If you break it down, the psychology, a pizza is a balanced meal, depending how it's made. I'm going to add, might not be a famous high street chain one, but something that's a bit more traditional. Your base is carbohydrate. Your toppings would be vegetables. Your protein would be whatever protein you add, or the cheese that you have on your pizza. If it's a vegan pizza, you can have vegan cheese, or you can add pulses. And that's actually with a drizzle of olive oil, if it's cooked that way with minimal salt, could be a very, very balanced meal. So it's definitely reframing how you see food, how you choose to see food. If you look at pizza as it's going to really satisfy me, give me one of my 5 a day, that's really different, right? To, oh, I'm going to have a pizza and I'm going to feel really bad afterwards, and I'm going to really punish myself for it afterwards.
You've just made my wife's night 100%. I can just tell that she's in another room and can't wait to tell me about the 5 nights a week she's now going to be eating pizza.
Right. Well, I'm going to add a caveat to that and say it's the type of pizza you consume. Why don't you get making them at home? Get a pita.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, to be fair, that's what we do. It's actually quite fun and very
Yeah,
easy.
yeah,
And
it's a
a
good family one as well.
hack for everyone is to use a tortilla as a base, and then you don't
Love.
even have to make the dough. So easy.
There you go.
Like a lot of people love food, but struggle with that second part, right? Which is feeling guilt-free. So how do you suggest that people approach eating guilt-free if they've always felt that way?
Address the rules in your head, write them down. I cannot express to you enough how, when you realize how you talk to yourself internally, it is huge. If you leave the house every morning, this is an example, you look in the mirror, do you ever say, wow, well, some of you might, I look great today? I mean, I don't think we talk to ourselves in the right way. And the same goes for when we're at the dinner table. We do not talk internally in our heads and say, this is a very satisfying meal. Look at all the wonderful nutrients I'm eating. I'm getting loads of vitamins. I'm eating a rainbow. This is great. We rarely feel like that. So it's unbreaking the diet rules that we've built up. And this actually is a process called intuitive eating. We actually have someone in our clinic who does that, only works on intuitive eating. It's such a big area. So saying no to the diet police, we say, that's very useful. If you hear that voice in your head saying, oh, I can't eat that right now, then get the rational one in and have a think about it. And what would your response be? If it were a friend saying that to you, what would you say to your friend? Surely you wouldn't be nasty to your friend. You would say something kind and reassuring. So it's gradually building it up. Address it, take it out of your head, put it on paper can really help.
It's so complicated though, right? Because presumably there are actually lots of benefits of that guilty feeling too. In the same way as stress can actually can actually be good for you. Of course, going the other way and never feeling guilty about what you eat can lead to you overeating, getting ill health, and therefore all the negatives that come with that. So, in some respect, you've got to say that guilt is a healthy psychological function too, no? Or is there a different way to analyze where the balance is?
I like that. I'm going to rephrase it. And instead of using the word guilt, just acknowledgement. I think acknowledging rather than the feeling. You don't need to put the emotion to it because that's just not a pleasant emotion. Guilt is a terrible emotion to feel. So instead of feeling the emotion, just acknowledge the situation. Okay, so I had an indulgence tonight. That was fun, but I know for my health or for how I feel in my body right now, that's probably not going to be how I'm going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow I might walk a bit more. Tomorrow I might start the day with some super healthy porridge for breakfast and know that I'm on a roll and I'm going to call a friend. And it is being responsible for your own lifestyle and your own health behaviors. Sometimes you need someone else to hold you accountable. And I would say having someone you can talk to, a friend, even about food or about getting out for a walk. God, having the motivation. I mean, I'm a new mum and I know how hard it is to leave the house. So if I don't make a plan with someone I'm going to call on my walk, I mean, sometimes I just wouldn't leave.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess one of the hardest things realistically for humans to do anyway is to unlearn, especially unlearning a bad habit, right? So if feeling guilty about eating is a bad habit, then how would you suggest that we do it guilt-free and unlearn that habit? Do you have any tactics for that?
Yes. Okay, first of all, let's get rid of the word guilt-free. I just want to, it's not guilt-free. It's just your normal way of looking at food and at life. So you have to unpick those demons. Like we said before, you have to start questioning them. You have to fight back. That's the only way you're ever going to unlearn something psychologically. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm a nutritionist that's done a bit of training in the psychology field. So if it's something that's really tough to break, definitely seek some professional help for that because that's so important. But it is unpicking that voice in your head, on your shoulder, your inner critic. That is the only way. If you don't start arguing, you're never going to climb over the hill. You've got to get up there first and really get to the bottom of why you're talking to yourself in that way.
Okay, so what are your top 3 tips for eating and loving food and doing it, last time we'll say it, guilt-free?
I know, there you go. Well, I think guilt-free is something everyone can understand. So tip number 1 would probably be address your food world. What is your food world? What foods do you think, and we do this in the clinic in a traffic light exercises, are in inverted commas good? I don't like calling foods good or bad, or in your eyes bad. So red for items you never allow yourself because they're just, like, I don't know, deep fried donuts or something. Those items tend to go in the red category, right? Amber, the middle light, could be something you allow yourself occasionally. It could be that indulgent granola we just discussed, or it could be that you have, trying to think of something amber that comes up in the clinic a lot. Nut butters seem to come up, like peanut butter and stuff seem to come up in amber a lot because there's still a lot of phobia around adding nuts to food, especially peanuts, because they're considered very fatty and they are a fattier nut. And then green would be lots of vegetables and fruits and things that people are like, well, I obviously should eat that all the time. So try and do that exercise and then start questioning why they're in that category. And is it such a bad thing they are? Is that helpful to you? If it's not helpful, then try and move a red item to amber and introduce it into your diet occasionally. And that's something we'll work on in the clinic. So that would be my first tip. Tip number 2 to eliminate feeling guilt would be to talk out loud. And if you can't talk, write. do that feeling fact we mentioned before. You've got to get it out. If you internalize it, it's only going to create a vicious cycle and probably more unhealthy behavior patterns like over-exercising, maybe to compensate. Other compensatory factors can be overworking, over-exercising, eating too much, eating too little, turning to alcohol, hopefully not turning to drugs, smoking, you name it. We've all got our vices. Identify them and replace your vice with something else halfway through. Maybe try and treat yourself to, instead of going out for that takeaway that night, if that's what you're doing every night, start with a ready meal and then introduce a healthy fakeaway at home that you can try and cook. The final tip, so we've got speaking out loud and trying new things, traffic light list. I think for being guilt-free, it's being kind. Try and say something nice to yourself every single time you identify a feeling of guilt. So, well, I do feel guilty about last night, but actually today I'm quite proud of myself because I managed to put the dinner on for my family and do bath time and do all the million and other one things that are in your life. I don't know, you managed to finish your essay if you're at uni, or you did a proposal at work, and just be kind to yourself and acknowledge it's a long process, but you can make a start at it.
Rachel wants to know, do you think the rules start at a young age when parents say things like, eat your dinner, otherwise there's no dessert, sit at the table until you've finished, etc.?
Or if you waste that food, starving countries, could be eating that food. Yes, 100%. Food behaviors start in childhood. First of all, never discuss with your children your shape or size, or comment negatively on your appearance or their appearance in front of them. The same goes for food. Try and always discuss food in a positive social way. And now the theory is, and I think this clear your whole plate thing did originate from a time where there wasn't plenty, and we were very lucky in the war. We were rationed in the UK and different countries. It all stems from somewhere, but now we're very fortunate to have access. And if your child is full, they're full. They can always go back to it later. And rewarding with food. Oh, goodness me. I think a lot of us still, myself included, we live with that. Dessert is the treat for doing well, getting a good exam grade or doing something. You reward yourself with food. Try and use other rewards rather than food would be my top tip there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Working In with Heights, potentially the only series dedicated to exercising your brain as well as your body. So we believe a healthy brain is the key to a healthy, happy life. So we created this idea of a cranium gymnasium to help people take the time to nourish their brains as well as their bodies. Heights is all about brain health and mental wellness. We make smart, sustainable supplements that combine the essential oils and nutrients your body and your brain need, and we deliver them to your doorstep every month. And then we create clever content in collaboration with leading experts like tonight to help you optimize your brain health and performance too, so you can reach your heights, whatever they might be. That's all from me. Time to introduce today's mental fitness instructor, Rhiannon Lambert. So firstly, welcome, Rhi.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm a registered nutritionist. I have a first class degree in nutrition and health, a master's degree in obesity risks and prevention, and I'm a master practitioner working with eating disorders and different relationships with food, so disordered eating behaviors. It tends to flow the kind of work I do as a registered nutritionist, as I am bound by a code of conduct and ethics. So I am governing body bound, meaning everything I say will be grounded in science. And I'm extremely passionate about making science, especially nutrition, evidence based nutrition, accessible to many people, which is where my platforms, Retrition on social media, came from, my books, Renourish. And I kind of have a very different journey into nutrition. I used to be a singer, I'm now a nutritionist. And my philosophy is pretty much building healthy relationships with food, because everybody has a story and journey, which we'll discuss today. And it's something on my podcast, Food for Thought, which I host. We discuss a lot of different science topics. I'm very lucky I get to interview, like yourself, you get to interview lots of really cool, amazing, intelligent guests, and you kind of learn so much every time. So a little bit about me, I guess I'm passionate about those things, and I have a multitude of books and platforms and social media stuff going on alongside my clinic, where I run a team of health professionals, and we work on many different aspects: sports nutrition, gut health, intuitive eating, eating disorders, pre and postnatal, weight management, you name it, we've got someone in the clinic that can help.
I'm someone who grew up fat and had a lot of profound impacts on my mental health, my confidence, my body image, to the point where eventually when I ended up losing weight and people were commenting saying that I was skinny, that wasn't what I would see. And instead, I just continued to lose the weight, even unintentionally. So even after the point where I was like, right, I don't, need to do that any longer. Um, I was just still doing it because I psychologically wasn't able to understand really what a healthy portion was or how much I needed to eat. It had all sort of changed. Um, and that was in the pre-Instagram days, right? That's as a man
Yeah.
who many people see as confident as well. And, it got so bad that I ended up having to go to Harley Street. I went to see like a whole bunch of different specialists because I couldn't keep my food down for a period of time, and I wasn't forcing myself to be sick. So I didn't actually have bulimia
Mm.
by any diagnosable measure because I wasn't forcing myself to do it. But whenever I went to the doctors, they weren't able to diagnose me with anything other than a psychological problem. So it was really interesting. I had, cameras down my stomach and everything,
Mm.
and every single time, they were like, there's literally nothing wrong with you physically, but mentally there's something that's causing you to have a problem physically, which is
Yeah.
really fascinating. Now, this is quite a few years ago, but it was over quite a reasonable period of time, from about 18 to 25. And it's a really good example of how like the psychological scars of sort of growing up insecure as a teenager then bear fruit in your 20s. And now I have a much more reasonable relationship with with mental health and with food, but still totally ingrained from my childhood. There's a lot of that in a talk. So a lot of the things that you've mentioned are completely relevant to me. I hear them, I understand them. My wife always jokes with me about what she knows that I'm saying about the food that I'm eating, etc. So I think where I'd like to start this conversation really is, like I said, I'm a man, people see me as confident, and there wasn't any Instagram when this was happening. So how bad do you think that this actually is in society, and how can we do something about it?
I actually fear it's just getting worse. And I just want to say thank you, because for a man to share his experiences in that way is not common. You get, thankfully, lots of women are very open now about their relationships with food and the experiences they experience with body image growing up. But it almost seems taboo for men to experience body image problems
Mm.
or feelings. It's almost as if men are seen to be devoid of feeling altogether, which makes the problem even worse. So, yes, I think the introduction of social media has made everything worse, if I'm being honest. And we also have an obesity epidemic, and we have more people growing up of larger body sizes and shapes, and they will be experiencing more health concerns. 1 in 3 children are now obese. We've got measurements in the schools potentially being introduced everywhere with weighing children in schools, which is going to have a huge psychological impact on a child, regardless of not of if it's private or not, it's still a big deal to put a child on a scales. I don't believe that's, in my opinion, I know I can see both sides, but I don't think that's the answer. It's just going to get worse, unfortunately. And I think a lot needs to be done in this area. And that's why in public health nutrition, everybody's still arguing and undecided on how to help with this sort of problem. I've been very fortunate to speak to other men in your situation, quite high profile, like Gary Barlow has had problems with his weight, and I got to interview and discuss that with him. Ronnie O'Sullivan is the same, who's our world champion snooker player. I'm his nutritionist, and we've discussed heavily his relationship with food. And one thing that I think has been a common theme throughout is that they all eventually spoke about it. So I think instead of making jokes across a dinner table, and it's ingrained, unfortunately, in families, oh, Piggy, you've got your second helping or your third helping, all those kind of remarks and comments. It's the language that we use to one another that needs to be reprogrammed. But we need to get that down to the bottom. It needs to be filtrated through to the very bottom level. And we almost need to start all over again. But it's so ingrained in cultures and societies. So language is tackling barrier number one. Government initiatives should be seen as just government initiatives. It will help. They need to do a lot, but so do the people that market products. So do manufacturers with their products. So do the individuals. Everybody needs to take a bit of responsibility. So the answer is not to fob it off to the government or the teachers or the nutritionists or the parents. It's everybody that needs to help one another. And maybe I'm living in this dream world of ideology here where I'm thinking if everybody just spoke kindly to one another, but I think that's what it's going to take, if I'm being honest, to help people.
Just to pick up the other side and talk about something interesting and cheery as well. What can we eat? What can we eat to be in peak performance and think about the conscious choices we're making to get into flow, for example?
Yeah, I love this. Let's talk about what we can put in rather than the takeout and something that we can all do. So starting, and it may sound like a boring broken record, but having a balanced plate is so important because your brain has a blood-brain barrier where only carbohydrates can get through. So it naturally wants to use carbs as its first fuel of energy, which is actually why there's quite a bit of debate out there with different people arguing different types of diets being more beneficial. But the science is that your body prefers glucose, which is the natural molecule of carbohydrate. You need glucose to go with protein to get it through that blood-brain barrier. If you combine these two items at every meal, you're going to help that serotonin production, which is that happy hormone we discussed earlier. That's extremely important. You're going to help the absorption of all the nutrients in the food you eat if you have a bit of healthy fat on your plate. And when I say healthy, I'm using that word rather than the good fats because every fat has a place, but it's the monounsaturated fatty acids and the polyunsaturated fatty acids, otherwise known as omega-3s, and things you find in nuts, seeds, avocado, oily fish. Olive oil is the one thing that you want to be using. That aids the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. So if you're getting lots of color on your plate, but you're not adding any fat, you're not going to be absorbing the full amount of nutrition you could do. If you're just eating protein and greens, you're not going to be getting a lot of that helpful tyrosine amino acid or tryptophan, which makes serotonin, happy hormone, dopamine, feel-good hormone we discussed earlier on. So without this kind of wonderful cog of wheels that it just works, these cogs are there to make the wheel go round. If you take one out, something's going to give. And my philosophy with nutrition really is try and always think of that. And if you're not sure what to do, a palm-sized portion of protein, one handful of carbs is often a good portion guide. I know this is very rough and individual. As much veg as you kind of want, or fruit, just 2 handfuls, and then a thumb-sized portion of healthy fat, which is like your drizzle of olive oil, 1 tablespoon. That's the best way to kind of think, this is what I'm going to eat. Color, lean proteins, whole grains, lots of fiber. Fiber feeds the gut bacteria, helps the gut flourish, helps those signals go back up to the brain. And you'll see from what we've discussed earlier how that all links in.
Yeah, it's interesting because of my particular focus and interest on brain health, obviously. The one place where I'm nodding along and I'm like, oh dear, probably over-index there is olive oil. Just because of all the research about how good it is for your brain's health. I mean, I get through so much that if I ever had ambitions to be thinner or lose weight from this point, olive oil would always stop that, but it's worth it for a healthy brain.
This is just it. Olive oil, 1 tablespoon is around 120 calories. So, but it tastes so good. And I'd rather people not think about the numbers, but try and focus on the properties in it. And also omega-3s are heavily linked to research of neurodegenerative disorders. So if we're talking about Alzheimer's, motor neuron, dementia, the more omega-3s you have in your diet, you're helping your cell membranes, which are the cushion around the cell, protecting the cells in your brain. That's what you want.
So do you suggest diet and nutrition to your clients for their mental well-being? Does that particularly come up as a thing?
Yeah, sometimes I get people coming into the clinic that just want to feel better every day and they think their diet's stopping them. And sometimes, I'm going to be honest, it kind of is. It can have a huge impact on how you feel every single day. If you are malnourished, that's way more dangerous than any bad food you can eat in your diet. You need, if you don't get enough iron, for instance, you can feel so lethargic, and anemia is so common in the UK. There's 2 types, which people don't often know. They just think of iron, but there's also B12 anemia. And now we've got a rise in plant-based eating and veganism, which is great. And it's a personal choice. I never judge anyone for their food choices. I'm just here to help them optimize them. If you want to do that, you have to make sure you're supplementing or you're getting the B12, because you'll run the risk of becoming deficient. And
quite often DHA and omega-3s as well, right? Because I think that's the other misconception is people are like, well, I can get that in flaxseed. You're like, well, not if you look at how much flaxseed you have to eat.
And how bioavailable it is in the body. So it actually takes a lot longer for, so it's called alpha-linoleic acid, ALA, which is the healthy fat found in plant-based sources. It takes a lot longer to convert that in the body to the DHA that you get from things like oily fish originally anyway, in large amounts. But the oily fish get it in the sea from eating the algae. Yeah, precisely. So all of these, I think this is where some cultures that are most heavily researched, so Japanese cultures and the Mediterranean diet, they're the 2 diets in the world. Actually, no, there are now 3, the Nordic as well, but all of them incorporate a lot of this healthy fat. So we know healthy fats are so important.
And where most of the blue zones come from, where people live the longest as well.
Pollution, you name it, all these different things play a role. The diet, how it's grown, the produce you eat. But ultimately, I'd rather just strive for getting your 5 a day, because we know that only 27% of the UK do. So that's still a starting zone that I want to try and champion.
So how much of our mental health, both positive and negative, do you think is connected to what and how we eat?
I think a large chunk of it is not just connected to what, it's more why and how. It's the association we've got with it, how we feel around it, the relationship we've built. I described it as a food world earlier, and I also like to call it a food script. It's like a play of your life with all the different experiences and how you've turned to alcohol or food or journeyed through. That's what impacts your mental health more than eating too much sugar every day, if that makes sense. It's not the item itself, it's everything about the item. It's the society, the environment, the body type, the relationship, the activity that all feeds in and works together with food. So it's too complex to simply say one item you put in will impact your mental health. It's the overall picture.
Sure. And what would you suggest for people who might still be struggling with anxiety or guilt around the food that they eat, and perhaps for anyone that has a loved one that they know that struggles with it? How might they help them and encourage them to have better mental behaviors towards food?
I think it's having that conversation is the first step, as always, being kind to yourself, identifying how big the problem is. There's lots of resources out there like Beat, the charity for eating disorders, if it is serious here. And there's a page for carers on their website on how to go about that conversation, because it's so hard. Food is so personal. How do you suddenly sit down with a friend and say, hey, I think you might have a problem here. How can I help? It's so personal, and you have to pick the timing right, and you have to be the right person to bring it up, because you could turn that person away from you, which is not what you want to do, and they may never come to you again, and it could make the problem worse. So it's identifying that first of all. There's lots of self-help tools out there if you want to work through any of the things I've discussed today in my book, Renourish: A Simple Way to Eat Well. I have a whole chapter called The Food Clinic, because not everyone has access to a nutritionist. It's expensive. It's not something that's on the NHS enough at the moment. And that talks you through a different body image test, food diary work, how to be kind to yourself, how to talk to yourself differently, all those different factors that can play such an important role.
What are your top 3 takeaways for people that struggle with diet and mental health, and how we can improve our relationship towards it?
Aim for that balanced plate, because if you're doing that at every meal, nutritionally speaking, you're on a way to a winner there, that you're definitely getting what you need in your diet, which means you're nutritionally functioning in the right way. The second would be, look at your lifestyle on a whole. Is there something missing? Is there something that's not quite right? Is it the sleep? Is it the activity every single day? Is that then affecting how you're feeling? Is it that you're miserable at work, which is where we spend most of our life? Unfortunately, we spend most of our life working compared to the other ratio. What can you do to enhance those factors instead of turning to food as a compensatory mechanism? Try and think about a change you can make in the pie. So draw out the pie and say you spend 20% of that pie thinking about food, or it could be a much larger percentage. And then you know what to tackle first. Is it that the sleep's causing the biggest problems because you're so sleep deprived? That would take up more of the pie. So it's identifying what works for you. And then finally, do something positive for you that's related to food. Make it fun. Get some friends over. Do something that's going to change your association with it. So if you're someone that always eats alone, eat with friends. Get something in the diary. I know we're living in a pandemic right now, so that's not as easy. But when it is, even do a virtual dinner. You can cook and sit down and eat dinner and talk to your friends. Make it social and fun.